just waiting if someone else wants to join. Are you able to see my presentation?
Yes, sir.
It is visible to you, no?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sir, I cannot see your presentation on the screen. I can see your video.
Okay, now is it visible?
No, sir.
Is it visible to you now?
Your video is coming only.
But earlier people told me that it's visible. That's what I was wondering. Anyone is able to see?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Now I can see.
One more tab is there.
Now you can see. Okay. Yeah. That's maybe I closed other tabs. But it's visible to you.
Different slides. That's it. Two tabs are
Yeah,
there.
exactly.
That's it. Okay.
Exactly. So I suppose we can begin right now. Welcome each and every one of you. It is an absolute pleasure to have all of you on this particular counseling session. Anyway, I suppose all of you must be. Just a second. I think there are a few entrants. Let me come and then get on with the task. I suppose all of you must be first-year students, isn't it?
Yeah.
What we'll do, we'll first go through the slides, and then whatever comments or whatever kinds of doubts or discussion we need to have, first of all, we'll type it over. You can type it over on the chat board so that it becomes easier for me to get a view of all that. And once the session, my presentation gets over, we can discuss about all that. Okay, that will be fine with you.
Yeah.
Okay. So shall I start? I suppose okay, someone else is joining. So. Okay, shall I begin with the presentation? Now the presentation is visible to you.
Okay, sir.
Is it visible? The slides are visible to you?
Yeah, for me, okay.
Okay, fine. So assuming that the slides are all clearly visible to you, I'm going ahead with the presentation. So when you talk about international relations per se, you have 4 or maybe 5 or 6 basic theories which we should all know. And knowing these theories alone is not enough. We should be able in a position to apply them to practical scenario. That is more important. Because international relations as such a changing area. Every day there is a variation, and as such, you have to be in a position to actually implement these in various international scenarios. And that will be one of my aims. I have prepared this presentation broadly resembling your study material, so that when you go through your study material, you will be in a position to easily locate the facts that I am stating. In between, we will also discuss about various practical applications of all these theories. I know some of you must be appearing for various competitive exams as well. In those scenarios, it will be important that you actually apply these theories to practical areas as well. So that is very important. So we will first deal with realism and its counterpart, Neo-Realism. When I talk of realism, we should realize one thing, that realism has been there right from the beginning of mankind, so to speak. Because if you look at the Peloponnesian War, an eminent theorist of those times, Thucydides, he in fact stated that realism is the basic concept that applies to international behavior among states. And that is true even today. If you see the world of theories as far as international relations is concerned, one theory which has stood the test of times for all periods is the theory of realism. Even today, even if you look at the current scenario in international relations, realism is a basic theory which in fact stands the test of time. Now, the first aspect that we will be dealing with today is the aspect of classical realism. Now, what do we mean by classical realism? That will come to a bit later. Now, when we talk about classical realism, we have to keep in mind that there are three major proponents of this theory. One is Reinhard Niebuhr, who lived between 1892 and 1971. Nicholas Spikeman, who lived between 1893 and 1943. And most important of all, Hans J. Morgenthau, upon whom the current thought in international relations as far as realism is concerned is purely based. He lived between 1904 and 1980. So he is one person who was with us till the recent past as well, we can very well say. Now, just to give a background of the kind of theories these people propounded, if you talk about Reinhold Niebuhr, one of the basic ideas he propounded was that there is a persistent root of evil in human life. That is, what he means is that humans by nature have an evil tendency in themselves. That is why there is egoism, hypocrisy, etc., etc. And when humans are hypocritic and humans are egoistic in nature, that will reflect in foreign policy also. So foreign policy as such is a reflection of human nature. And therefore, you can always expect countries to attack other countries, take over the territory of other countries, and also try to dominate other countries. I hope I am clear with the first point. This was the basic idea that Reinhold Niebuhr propounded. Now you can read about more of this on various websites and all that. I will be giving you some readings as well at the end of this presentation. You can have a look at that. Then the second theorist that we are talking about today, Nicholas Spikeman. Now, Nicholas Spikeman is remembered for one basic theory, that is the rimland theory. And that is very, very important because it influenced human thought for a long time. You must have heard about this theory, rimland theory. What does it state? The rimland theory states that, first of all, what is rimland? That is more important. R-I-M-L-A-N-D. What does rimland mean? Rimland basically means a strip of coastal land that encircles Eurasia. You know what is Eurasia? The land that encapsulates a bit much of Asia and Europe. And this rimland is the strip of coastal land that circles Eurasia. Now, what he meant by the rimland theory is that he stated that controlling the rimland is more important than controlling the heartland, because earlier theories were propounded that the ones who control the heartland control the world. Heartland basically means the Central Asian zone. However, Spikeman stated that no, that is not true. Basically, if you want to control the world, basically control the rimland. That is the basic theory that he propounded. And that was a change in mindset as such, because till that time, people were saying that those who control the Central Asian zone or the heartland basically control the world. So that was a shift in idea that he brought about. Now we will talk about the ideas propounded by Hans de Morgenthau in great detail. Okay. Now, for you from the examination perspective, as well as from the perspective of various competitive exams and so on, the ideas propounded by Hans de Morgenthau is very, very important. And the name of the book, as I have put it in the title, is Politics Among Nations, The Struggle for Power and Peace. This is the basic book that he has written, and it is very, very significant. If you can get a copy of that and read through, it will be wonderful. Now, what does he say in this book? That is very, very important for all of us. The first point that he states is that political realism believes that politics, like society in general, is governed by objective laws. And where do these objective laws come from? These are all based on human nature. So what he means to state is that if you want to improve the society as such, you should understand the laws by which the society lives. In an extension, what it means is that if you want to understand international relations also, because international relations is basically a policy as such, if you want to understand international relations also, you should understand what human nature stands for. Now, what does human nature stand for? Human nature is more about what? It's about competitiveness. There are good elements also, but there is a strong egoistic mentality also. That is what leads humans to dominate over other humans, and as such, international relations also have this particular dominative streak. I hope I am making myself clear on this. The second point that he states is the main signpost that helps political realism to find its way through the landscape of international relations is the concept of interest defined in terms of power. Now, the second point is very important for you. According to Hans de Morgenthau and most of the realists in general, interest is always defined in terms of power. Don't you think that is true? Even today, if you look at it, interest is basically defined in terms of power. What do you call the interest of a nation? It is always equated in terms of power. We will come to this in more detail later on. Then, another point he states is that realism assumes that the concept of interest defined in terms of power as an objective category is universally valid. Interest defined in terms of power is valid for all countries. That is point number one. But it does not endow that the concept has a same meaning for all countries. Now, the national interest, when we define it, it is not the same for all countries. India may have a different national interest, Pakistan may have a different national interest, China may have a different national interest, USA may have a different national interest. So, even though national interest defined in terms of power is universally valid for all countries, that is, all countries pursue national interest defined in terms of power, but that does not mean that the concept of national interest per se is the same for each country. Its definition varies between country to country. The fourth point that he makes is that political realism is aware of the moral significance of political action. Realism maintains that universal moral principles cannot be applied to the actions of states in their abstract universal formulation, but they must be filtered through the concrete circumstances of time and space. This essentially means that when you talk about foreign policy per se, when you talk about international relations per se, when you talk about behavior of states per se, you have to have a clear understanding of the circumstances in which the country is acting in a certain way. That is very important. Without understanding the circumstances, you cannot actually state whether the country is doing right, wrong, or whatever it is. Political realism refuses to identify moral aspirations of a particular nation with the moral aspirations that govern the universe. This is almost the same. Like if democracy is a moral aspiration of a certain country, we cannot say that democracy as such should be accepted as the moral aspiration of all states. That is not acceptable whatsoever. Whenever we talk about moral aspirations of a state, it should be understood in the context of that state and not otherwise. So, we'll move on to the next slide. Now, when we talk about the classical realism, one concept that you should have in mind is the concept of balance of power. Now, we all know what balance of power is. When you have two groups, either at the international level or even at the regional level, then these two groups try to balance their power with each other. Whenever one group of country tries to increase its power relative to the other group of countries, what happens is that the other group of countries essentially try to balance it once again by increasing their own power. And that is very important as far as international relations is concerned. Whenever there is world peace only when there is balance of power. When there is a unilateral attempt to change the balance of power, it essentially means that there will be a reaction from the other group of countries which are at the receiving end. And therefore, there will be a constant struggle till that time that another balance is achieved. And that we are seeing today, isn't it? Even if you look at the regional conflicts as such, we see that balance of power actually plays a greater role. Now, related to this concept of balance of power is the concept of security dilemma. I hope you must have heard about the concept of game theory. Security dilemma basically derives itself from game theory. Now, when we talk about game theory, there is a particular paradigm in game theory called the prisoner's dilemma paradigm. Now, in prisoner's dilemma, it's a fantastic story which you should all know. I'm sure many of you already know about it. In prisoner's dilemma, two thieves are caught and they had done a crime in unison. That is, they have done a crime together. Pardon me, did you say anything? Okay, I will continue. Now, what it means is that you have a certain scenario in which two prisoners had been caught for doing a certain crime. They are now caught by the police and they are being interrogated. Now, what happens is that they are put in separate cells and they are being interrogated separately. Now, being interrogated separately means that they are not in a position to talk to each other. They are not in a position to express their views with each other, and interrogation is conducted separately. Now, what will be the idea? Now, if they both I will give you the scenarios also. If they both admit their crime, they will be given a small punishment. If they do not admit the crime, if both of them do not admit the crime, then they will be left scot-free. Further, if both of them, if one admits and one does not admit the crime, then the person who admits the crime will be given a very small punishment or even maybe let off, whereas the person who does not admit the crime, he will in fact be punished heavily. In this scenario, what will be the likely outcome be? if you are in that place, what will you do as such? Will you admit that you have done the crime? Will you admit that you have not? Will you say that you have not done the crime? What will be your position? Can you just type it out on the chat board? Two prisoners, they have been caught for a crime. They have done the crime together. The police is interrogating them. They are in separate cells, and each one has been given time to explain his or her position. The crime, and if one person admits the crime and the other person does not admit the crime, then the person who admits the crime will be given a very light sentence, and the person who does not admit the crime will be given a very strong sentence or a very strong punishment. If both of them do not admit the crime, then both of them are left free. Now, in this scenario, what will your position be? Obviously, you will take the position that you will admit that you have committed the crime, because in that case, you will not get the maximum punishment possible, even though you may get a light punishment. This is the same scenario which works out in the case of what? States also. Suppose a particular nation tries to arm itself heavily, then what will happen? If the other country does not arm itself heavily, like the country which has already armed itself heavily, especially if they are neighbors, what will happen is that if the first country attacks the second country, the country which has not armed itself heavily, they will be at the receiving end and they will get high collateral damage. In that case, the country which has not armed itself will be at a big loss. On the other hand, if the country which has armed itself, if when the first country arms itself, the second country also arms itself heavily, then the scenario will be that the second country will be in a position to retaliate against the first country when it attacks it. So that is the concept of security dilemma that we are talking about. Whenever we have a scenario in which one country unilaterally increases its power, there is a reaction on the part of other countries, especially if they are neighbors or competitors, to arm themselves to the level so as to deter the other country. Deterrence basically means that you can prevent the first country from actually unleashing terror on your country. I hope I have made that concept clear. This concept of security dilemma is very closely related with the concept of classical realism that we are talking about today. So let's move ahead. Now, over a period of time, classical realism became obsolete. I wouldn't say obsolete as such, but there were certain additions which are required. So we had the new concept, which is a concept of Neo-Realism, which came into play. Now, what does Neo-Realism actually propose? Now, one of the greatest proponents of Neo-Realist theory is someone called Kenneth Waltz. He has written the book Theory of International Politics, which is a classic book, a classic exposition of the Neo-Realist position. Now, Neo-Realists first and foremost state that there is a recurrent pattern in international relations. Now, what does recurrent pattern mean? Recurrent pattern means that the events that took place in the past are likely to repeat themselves in future as well. Now, when we began our class, we started off by stating that there was a theorist by the name Thucydides. He had written about the Peloponnesian War between Sparta and Athens. Sparta and Athens were great rivals in the ancient times. Now, if you look at the Cold War rivalry between USA and USSR, you will find the same pattern of interaction or a similar pattern of interaction that existed between Sparta and Athens. So, only time changes, but the pattern of interactions in international relations remains unchanged. Okay, that is the basic concept he states. He states that over a period of time, there is a recurrent pattern in international relations, and that repeats itself over periods of time again and again. So basically, when you have the Sparta and Athens kinds of relation, you can see a replica of that in the US and USSR type of relation as well. Sparta was a kind of rigid state in comparison to Athens, which was a democracy, so to speak. And the similar kind of pattern also existed between USA and USSR. USA is a democracy, whereas the USSR was a rigid communist state which competed against the USA. And if you look at the kind of interaction, like the international relations they had between each other, there is a great deal of similarity between Sparta-Athens relations and US and USSR kind of relation. So I hope I'm making my point very clear in this. Now, the second point that Walsh argues is that international relations is in a state of perpetual anarchy. Now, what do you mean by anarchy? Anarchy means that there is no proper ordering in the international system. Every state is free to do what it likes, and there does not exist any international. We'll come to that in a greater detail sometime later. In the domestic realm, of course, when you talk about the state level, that when you take each individual state into consideration, there exists definite legal systems, definite control mechanism in the form of governments, courts, so on and so forth. But in the case of international relations, you cannot find such a mechanism, even though there are schemes like the UN organization, International Court of Justice, etc., but they do not have effective controlling power. That's what Kenneth Walsh actually states. In this scenario, what must be the action of states? That is very important. States must always act in a way that ensures their security. Otherwise, the risk is that they will fall far behind. Now, that can be seen in all kinds of interaction that we see today. If you don't ensure your own security as a state, there is every possibility that other states may take advantage of you. And therefore, the realist states that you have no other option but to ensure that your actual domestic scenario is such that you take effective steps to ensure that your security is secured for all times. Now, Neo-Realism is also called structural realism because the effects of the structure of international system determines the outcomes in international politics. Now, I do not know how many of you are students of economics as well. Because in economics, you have a concept called perfect competition. Perfect competition is that kind of scenario in which there are a large number of firms and they are not strong enough. No one firm is strong enough to determine the price, quantity, or output. So that is the kind of system that international relations also borrows, according to Kenneth Walsh. Kenneth Walsh states that the functions that each country performs is the same. Each country is an independent unit as such. But where the countries actually vary is in the nature of their capabilities. Each country has a different capability in itself. India's capability is not the same as that of Iran. Iran's capability is not the same as China. China's capability is not the same as USA. So the capabilities of countries varies from one another. And it is in this scenario that structure determines the pattern of international relations. Now, there are certain basic principles as far as this Walshian concept of neo-realism is concerned. The first one is that international systems ordering principle is anarchy. That is, there is anarchy in the international system. Since each state is free to do what it wants, and there is no overall controlling mechanism. Of course, there is UN and other agencies, but they are not in a position to control the countries as such. Since that is the situation, there is anarchy in the international system. What does anarchy mean? There is no order. Each country can do as it wants, and there is total chaos in the international system. So in this kind of chaotic situation, what we have is a self-help system. Now, what does self-help means? That is, you have to rely on your own power to defend your national interest. No other country is going to come and help you. Even if they want to help you, the kind of help that they extend will be limited. So, first and foremost, the basic ordering principle of international relations is anarchy. And anarchy is basically what? A self-help system in which each country has to help itself. No other country or no other system is going to come and help you defend your self-interest. That is point number one. Now, the second principle is what I mentioned earlier, that is distribution of capabilities. What Wall states is that the distribution of capabilities differs among countries. Capability or power vary significantly among states. So, country A's power and capability is not the same as country B's power and capability, and therefore each country has to value its capability to help itself. So that is why, since there is a variation in capabilities among countries, you have alliances among countries. That is, weaker countries will ally themselves with stronger countries as well, so that they can actually present a challenge or defend themselves against very strong countries. So this is one of the basic ordering principles that I would like to state here. Now, when we talk about the Second World War, in fact, Marx also talks about the Second World War. The Second World War had changed the ordering principle of the world. The system was still anarchic, but it changed the distribution of power. It took away power from countries like Germany and other countries, and it enabled countries like Great Britain, US, etc. to exert themselves. So the Second World War actually destroyed the earlier balance of power which existed and created a new balance of power between USA and USSR. I hope I am making myself clear here. So in a nutshell, when we talk about the realist concept, we are talking about three essential aspects. One is they laid emphasis on national interest. Now, the problem with national interest is that it does not have a uniform definition with each country. That is, national interest differs from country to country. We will come to that a little bit later. Then the second concept that the realists put forward was the concept of national power. And the third one is the concept of national security. So when you talk about realist concept, these are the three major aspects that you should emphasize upon. Now, let us come to the issue of national interest. Now, if you take Kenneth Waltz, if you take the earlier classical realists or anyone in the realist school, you will find that national interest always has a primary role to play in their conception. Now, the pursuance of national interest is the primary justification of all states. That is, if you want to exist as a state, you should pursue your national interest. But the problem here is, what is national interest? Now, that is something that we need to understand very clearly. National interest is not uniform for all the countries. There is a variation as far as the concept of national interest is concerned among countries also. So, unless and until we understand that national interest varies, we may define national interest wrongly. Now, if you take the case of Napoleon and Hitler, what was their national interest? Aryans was the national interest of whom? National interest of Hitler. Similarly, for Napoleon, conquest of the entire world was his national interest. For India, for example, establishment of democracy and securing its borders are its national interests. Similarly, national interest varies between country to country. Therefore, we cannot say that there is a uniform kind of distribution of national interest. That national interest does not have the same meaning for all countries. Both cooperative and collective national interests are possible. Now, what do you mean by this? There can be instances in which national interest can be achieved in a cooperative manner. That is, if countries cooperate with each other, then in certain cases we can have national interest. For example, if you take the case of European Union, several countries came together and cooperated in the economic, political, and various other fields, and they were able to build a strong union, and their economic and social as well as military interests were secure. That is the concept of cooperative national interests. On the other hand, you can have conflictive national interests also. Let us take the case of India and Pakistan. In many cases, especially in the case of various border disputes and so on and so forth, we have a conflicting national interest. The achievement of one country's national interest will work against the achievement of the other country's national interest. So there the interests are conflictive in nature. So there is a variation between or a difference between a cooperative kind of national interest and a conflictive kind of national interest. In the case of European Union, you have a cooperative kind of national interest. In the case of many Asian countries, you have conflictive national interests coming into play. Now, in the case of Morgenthau stated that power and interest will go together. And he also states that the minimum national interest for every country is to protect their physical, political, and cultural identity. If a country is not able to protect its physical, political, and cultural identity, then that country will cease to exist and its national interest cannot be secured at all. So for Morgenthau as such, if you see, survival is the main objective of national interest. Now, national interest as such is very important. However, the concepts of national power and national security are also very important. These three concepts are related to each other. Now, when we talk about national power, what does it mean? National power is a complex system where you have aspects such as military power, economic power, political power, so on and so forth. When we talk about power as such, there is this concept of soft power also, which is very important for you. What is soft power? Many countries, due to their cultural as well as diasporic and other kinds of influence, can exert influence on other countries and their policy making. For example, Indian films, Bollywood films, they had been a great source of soft power for much of our existence because Bollywood films influenced the thought process of many people in Russia, in US, and even in countries like Afghanistan, where it is very popular. So the soft power basically means your cultural power. Your power, which is not based on military or any other aspect, but your cultural, political, civilizational power through which you exert influence over other countries. That is very important asset. So you should keep in mind the concept of soft power. Now let us come to a practical question. We have till now discussed the concept of realism and neo-realism. Can you now analyze the current Indo-Chinese relation from a realist perspective? Can you do that? I'll give you 4 to 5 minutes time. Can you just type in, if possible, whether you can use the realist concept to analyze Indo-China relation, the current scenario. Am I audible to you? Just two or three lines you can just type it so that I understand that you have got the concept well. I do not want an elaborate answer. Just two lines will be sufficient. 2 or 3 lines. Okay, if you want to attempt that question later also, there is no problem as such. But if you have any doubts regarding the section which we have dealt with now, you can ask me on the chat. If you have to ask any doubts regarding this area also, you can ask now. You can put your doubts on the chat. Because before moving to the next section, I just want to confirm that you are clear with the concepts. Okay. There is a question from Rajita Kumar. Please explain realism in short. Realism basically is the concept which states that as a nation, you should protect 3 essential interests of yourselves. That is, one is national interest, one is national power, and the third one is national security. Only if you protect all these 3 basic interests of yours, your country can secure its existence at the international level. Nothing more, nothing less. So I hope this is in short what realism means. Of course, I know I am too short about it, but this is the shortest possible way in which I can explain realism. I hope you are okay with it. Okay, does anyone else have any doubt or any clarification is required? If not, I will move on to the next section. Okay, then I shall move on to the next section. The next section we will be dealing with. Okay, you can just note down these if you want, because it will be good reading and good for you. You can just view it also. These are very short videos. Further, the reading International Relations by Palmer and Perkins will be very useful for you. So if anyone wants to read that book, please do read this book. It is a very well-written but simple book on international relations. The title of the book is International Relations, and it is written by Palmer and Perkins. Anyone who wishes to use it can use it. It is a very popular book, so it should be available in the bookstores also. So please do read it. And if you want to read see some basic videos, please view these 2 videos. You can just note down the link so that you can view these videos later on. These are very short videos, but it will give you a very good idea of what realism is. Please note it down if you so decide. Okay, I hope you have noted it down. I shall move on to the next section. The next section deals with the concept of functionalism. This is another theory which is very, very important for you. Functionalism. Now, the major theorists associated with functionalism are David Mitrani, Joseph Nye, Ernest Haas, Sewell, Paul Taylor, so on and so forth. Now, functionalism in fact states that there is a great deal of importance for interdependence among states. Not basically states, but sectors. Now, greater interdependence in the form of transitional ties between countries could lead to peace. That is their basic contention, that there should be greater interdependence between various sectors of the country with the similar sectors of other countries, so that there can be close cooperation between them. And that when you have close cooperation between the sectors of one country to another country, what will happen is that ultimately there will be peace and tranquility. That is what the functionalists actually mean. Their basic aim is to develop non-political cooperative organizations. Now, there are two kinds of cooperative organizations. One is political cooperative organizations, and second one is non-political cooperative organizations. Suppose the agriculture sector of India wants to collaborate with the agriculture sector of Bangladesh, say. That is a kind of non-political kind of cooperation that is taking place. Whereas there can be political cooperation also among the political entities of the two countries. Now, functionalists state that when there is the development of non-political cooperative organizations, it will lead to world peace and security. And when this kind of non-political cooperative outcome increases, people will realize that war is an obsolete mechanism and there is no use of having a mechanism like war itself. And they will cooperate with each other. That is their concept as far as functionalism is concerned. Now, nation states is considered to be the biggest obstacle in the path of fostering peace and prosperity, according to functionalists. Functionalists state that if there is war, if there is kind of conflict between states, it is because there are lots of nation states involved. If you remove this concept of nation states from the way, and if sectors collaborate with each other, the problem of world conflict does not exist at all. There will be peace and prosperity if the concept of nation state as such is undermined. That is what the functionalists state. A gradual approach towards regional and global unity. Of course, the functionalists know that this is not going to happen in a hurry. So they are willing to wait. They want similar sectors to start cooperating among countries. And when this cooperation takes off in a big way, it will eventually lead to cooperation in other sectors and between other countries also. And that way, over a long period of time, there will be regional and global unity. Cooperative organizations at the regional level in political areas such as economic, technical, scientific, social, cultural sectors, where the possibility of forging effective cooperation among states appears to be highly practical, in those areas there should be more cooperation. It is easily possible that economic, technical, scientific, social, cultural sectors can cooperate with each other. For example, ISRO can easily cooperate with NASA. So there is a one-to-one cooperation between the space sectors there. Similarly, if you take the agriculture sector, ICAR can easily, Indian Council of Agriculture Research can easily cooperate with the National Agriculture Council of Bangladesh. So there is a sector-to-sector cooperation there. Similarly, India has a huge diaspora in, say, Israel. So in the cultural sector also, India can join hands with the Jews who had left India to Israel. So there is a kind of cultural cooperation as well. So what I mean to say here is that when cooperation takes place among these sectors, that is non-political sectors, that is the sectors which are basically of a cultural, social and scientific nature, there will be overall cooperation over a long period of time. This is a basic concept of functionalism as such. Now, the best example of this has taken place in the European Union. If you see, in European Union, though you have an umbrella framework of national governments cooperating, still there is a great deal of sector-to-sector cooperation among countries. That is why European Union is so successful as on date. Here, these functionalists actually emphasize on functional sectors. The possibility of opposition or resistance appears minimal among functional sectors. For example, if the agriculture sectors of two countries cooperate with each other, there is hardly any possibility of a military conflict emerging among these two agricultural sectors. So, when functional sectors cooperate with each other, this cooperation will be non-controversial, and this will lead to lasting peace if all the functional sectors in both the countries cooperate with each other. So, what is required is to establish functional organizations at a macro level in political sectors such as non-political sectors such as energy production, distribution, transport and communication, health, so on and so forth. Now, the concept that you should remember here is the concept of spillover effect. This is very important as far as the functionalist concept is concerned. Spillover effect. Now, what is spillover effect? It means that cooperation in one area would open avenues for similar cooperation in other areas. Just as if you move a tumbler with water, the water will spill around. Similarly, if you have cooperation between one sector in one country and another sector in another country, soon there will be a kind of demonstration effect. And if the cooperation between these two countries, in these two sectors in two different countries succeeds, then other sectors will also think, if they can succeed, why not we? And then they will also try to extend cooperation with their similar sectors in other countries. So, cooperation in the area of coal and steel production would spill over to cooperation, say, in iron ore production, so on and so forth. And similarly, other sectors will also try to cooperate with each other. So, that kind of a cooperation will have its spillover effect to other sectors as well. So, you have, if you take the European Union and other areas like NAFTA and all that, you have cooperation in areas like transport, pollution, so on and so forth. So, this is the basic concept of functionalism. That is, cooperation among sectors will lead to overall peace and development among countries. I hope I am clear with this. Next one, let us move on to the concept of neo-functionalism. Now, what does neo-functionalism mean? Over a period of time, it was felt that the concept of functionalism had its own major weaknesses. So, what happened was that Ernest Haas and his friends, they propounded the concept of neo-functionalism. Now, if you remember the concept of functionalism, you will see that functionalists did not give a major role for the state in their concept. They kept the state aside, and they stated that the sectors within states should interact with each other. Whereas in the case of neo-functionalism, what happened was that the neo-functionalists stated that the aim should be at integrating existing states into a bigger union. What does that mean? The best example of this is the European Union. That is, when states cooperate at the national level with each other, then over a long period of time, they will feel that cooperating and integrating with each other is a better option. There will be no conflict. And as such, over a long period of time, you will have union of states such as the European Union. So first what will happen is that initially at the regional level, states will cooperate with each other. And in the long run, there is a possibility that all nations of the world will cooperate with each other and a single world state may be formed. That's what neo-functionalists actually mean. The inspiration of this idea obviously came from the European Union, because if you see France and Germany were two countries which had fought with each other for centuries. But in the 1950s, what happened was that France and Germany started cooperating with each other in various sectors such as the coal and steel community, atomic energy, and so on and so forth. So that gave confidence to other nations that if countries like France and Germany, which had been fighting with each other for centuries, could come together and work together, then we can all form an union. And that is how the concept of the European Union was formulated. Now, what is basic in this concept is that there has to be a system of cooperative decision making. That is, countries should be ready to cooperate with each other to arrive at decisions. Now, this differs a bit from the idea that Mitrani had given, that technical matters can be separated from politics. But in the case of functionalists, they believe that technical matters cannot be separated from politics. If there is political support alone, there will be greater union between states. Otherwise, you cannot have a kind of technical union without politics getting involved. So there will gradually be a tendency towards voluntary creation of large political units, each of which eschews the use of force. When you have large political units joining together, they will obviously move away from using force. Actors voluntarily give up certain powers. Now, if this has to happen, if a union of states has to come about, then what is required is that states should be ready to give up their decision-making powers in certain areas. For example, Europe has the European Monetary Union. Now, if each state states that it will decide its monetary policy by itself, then a monetary union is not possible. For a monetary union to get created, the states will have to give away powers in various aspects, and then only the monetary union will come around. So only when the states give away their sovereignty in certain areas, this kind of a union can come about. If the states say that they will take decisions on all the sectors, then other states will not agree to that. So there cannot be any union as such. So when states decide that they will surrender their sovereignty in certain areas in favor of the union, then this kind of a union will actually take place. Now, a prominent theorist, Joseph Nye, states that states should pool together their resources and surrender some of their sovereignty to create integrated communities. Only when states pool together their resources, pooling together means, for example, pooling together the military forces of the countries in a union to protect against a common enemy, and surrender some of their sovereignty, that is, surrender some of their decision-making power, then only this integrated community such as the European Union will come about. And this is essential for ensuring peace and growth. Now, this is as far as functionalism and neo-functionalism is concerned. I will give you a question here, a practical question. You just think about it, and you can maybe whenever we meet next, we can discuss about it. Based on your understanding of functionalism and neo-functionalism, explain why regional integration has not worked in South Asia. If you see, we have the SARC. The SARC has been there for many, many years, but still SARC has not succeeded. Why? You have to analyze this issue on the basis of the functionalist and neo-functionalist theory. Think about why SARC has not been a successful endeavor from the angle of functionalism and neo-functionalism. And maybe when we meet next, we can discuss further about it. So about functionalism and neo-functionalism, if you have any doubt or clarification is required, please type in on the discussion chat, discussion board. If you have any doubt regarding what we have discussed now regarding functionalism and neo-functionalism, please type it down.
Sir, you use word national state, nation state in functionalism. So it means that the feeling of nationalism.
No, nation state basically, see, there is a difference between functionalism and neo-functionalism. Now, functionalists, what do they say? They say that nation state can remain as it is, but sectors within nation state should collaborate. For example, we have the coal and maybe say agriculture. ICAR is the governing body for agriculture. ICAR from India can collaborate with the National Agriculture Agency of, say, Bangladesh. The national government need not come into play in that. Similarly, other sectors can also collaborate with each other. There they say that the interference of national government is not required. On the other hand, the neo-functional state, that you cannot have it that way. Nation state will come into play. The national governments will definitely come into play, but the aim is to create an integrated system, that is an integrated kind of mechanism wherein all states at the political level can also collaborate with each other. For example, for military purposes, for political decision making, for taking a common stand at the UN. For that also, states can come together and take a common decision. That is what neo-functional state. Functional state, that sectors will cooperate. Neo-functional state, that states by itself will also cooperate. Sectors will definitely cooperate because states are cooperating, but in the functional scheme, only the sectors are cooperating. In the neo-functional scheme, states are also cooperating with each other. I hope the concept is clear to you.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other doubt?
So can you explain the role of transnationalism?
Transnationalism basically means that the country, you are you are not basing your decisions just on a nationalistic perspective. If I say that I will protect the mountains and my environmental resources within India alone, that means that I am looking at it from a nationalistic perspective. Only the nation matters to me. But transnationalism means that, suppose I take the entire SAARC region into consideration. The entire SAARC region is taken into consideration, and the problems of the entire SAARC region are considered. And I put forth a view considering all these kinds of problems related to environment, which are affecting all SAARC nations. Then my concept is not limited to my nation at all. It covers more than one nation. It covers the entire region. So I hope that is clear to you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sir, a question from the previous part. That can you explain the nature of human nature in the realism and neo-realism?
Yeah.
State of nature.
That's a very good. Yeah. Pardon me.
State of nature, according to
yes. State of nature. Okay. State of nature basically is associated with more ancient, more older realists such as Hobbes and so on. State of nature basically is a concept which was evolved to bring in the concept of social contract as such. Now, it is considered, it is the conception of these theories that in olden times, everyone was free. Each and every person was free to do what he wanted. There was no regulation of law. There was absolute freedom. Now, what happens when this absolute freedom is there? Now, there are different concepts. Hobbes says in a negative way, Rousseau and others say in a positive way. But when normally, according to the commonsensical understanding, what will happen when there is absolute freedom in the state of nature? Man by nature is egoistic. Now, if man by nature is egoistic, what will happen is that when he is given absolute power, he will try to usurp the property and other things of other persons. And he will also try to amass wealth and other things by harming other people also. And that will create a kind of conflict between nations, between persons. And in this kind of a conflictive solution system, people cannot exist. People will find it very difficult to exist because there is each one is at conflict with each other, and there is constant struggle in the society. So, for your general benefit, what you do is that you decide, that is the general public or the people in a society decide to surrender some of their rights and freedoms and privileges to a common governing authority, and that governing authority is basically the government. And the government on your part, it regulates laws of nature. It in fact brings in rule of law. It controls the unwanted element, and it also tries to preserve peace in the society. So the state of nature led to a civil society because of this particular factor, that over a period of time, you have a system wherein people will try to harm each other. But there are other theorists who say that no, the state of nature was a very good kind of a system where everyone was at peace with each other, and it is only because of the factor of convenience that they decided to form the government. That is a different view, but the more commonsensical and logical view, which realists also support, is that there was anarchy in the society, and in the anarchy you have a system. You have everyone was at each other's thought, and you had to actually bring this system under control. And therefore, you surrendered your absolute freedom in favor of controlling the overall law and order situation and put in place a government. Now, this kind of an egoistic position is there in man as such. Now, why do countries come into conflict with each other? Why does one country try to attack another country? The fact is very simple, because it is in human nature to be in a conflict mode. Man tries to get the property of others. So one country would definitely try to usurp the land of another country. Because what is a country made of? Country is made of people. And if the people are egoistic in nature, if the people have their own self-concept which is related to ego, if the people are of such a nature, they are conflictive in nature, that will definitely spill over to the international sphere. That is why I really say that if you want to understand the nature of international politics, you have to first understand the nature of each and every person. Since man is egoistic, since man is not truly 100% altruistic in nature, you have a situation where the international system is also not perfectly in equilibrium. It is in anarchy. Hope I have made my point clear.
Yes, sir. So, can you explain the strategic realism of Thomas Schelling?
See, strategic realism basically implies that you should have a kind of strategy to deal with each and every nation. Mm-hmm. There is a kind of relativistic concept which is involved. That is, one country has to frame its policy in a way and manner that is relative to another country. So strategies will vary. Strategies will be framed as per the ground realities that you face. And therefore, you have this concept of strategic realism coming into play. Of course, that is not explained as a great part of our syllabus as such. So I haven't done a great deal of reading as such on that. So next time, if you want, I can do a bit more of reading on that, and I come and elucidate that.
Yeah, sure, sir. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Sir, one more question, sir, if it is permissible.
Yeah, please.
Sir, if I say the realistic perspective is high politics and neo-realism is low politics, is it true?
You cannot exactly say that, because both have aspects of high politics and both have aspects of low politics also. Of course, what you see is correct, because if you look at the proportion as such, the proportion in favor of our classical realism will be higher, and the proportion in favor of neo-realism will be a bit lesser. But to say that one is totally in one compartment and one is totally in the other compartment may not be true. It will be a mix of both of those. That's what I feel. That's my personal view. Both has elements of both.
Okay. Sir, can you explain the offensive and defensive realism in concept with realism and neo-realism?
Pardon me?
Can you explain the terms offensive realism and defensive realism in terms of neo-realism and realism, classical realism?
That needs a bit more of explanation. Offensive realism and defensive realism are entirely new two areas which I plan to cover separately,
Yeah,
because
sure.
there are a lot of issues involved in that. Even the security dilemma has to be explained in a different way in relation to that, because security dilemma is the primary thing which I will be using to explain offensive realism and defensive realism. So for that, I need at least half an hour to 45 minutes. So I was thinking of doing that in the practical portion of whenever I do the next class. So can you wait till that, or you want it right
Sure,
now?
sir. Will you go through these lectures? I mean, you are continuing these lectures?
Yeah, I will be continuing it, but maybe not immediately. Next month, I will be having the next session. So if you are interested, I will definitely do a detailed analysis on that. But the only thing is that offensive realism and defensive realism has to be analyzed with the help of security dilemma. That is
Yeah, I
very
understand.
important,
Yeah, understand. So
because
actually,
for that I will have to first of all explain the contours of security dilemma first. Then only I will be able to come specifically into both of these. So I need at least half an hour for that.
okay, sir. Sir, I request you to make more lectures because it is very helpful for us.
Okay. Next, maybe next month beginning, you will have the next lecture, and I have noted it down. Offensive realism and defensive realism, we will deal in detail.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
In fact, even otherwise, I was going to deal with this because it is, especially from a competitive examination point of view, sometimes these aspects are important. I know many of our students are even preparing for that. So from
Yes.
that angle, I was trying to deal with this. So I thought I will just go through the theories in basics today, and after that we will come into these application-oriented aspects. But this was always on the agenda. Don't worry, we will cover this in great detail.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Welcome, most. Anyone else? Okay, I think I can now move on to the next section. That is Marxist approach. Now, Marxist approach to international relations. This is also an important area from the perspective of your examination, because many times this question is asked. What is Marxism? What is the Marxist approach to IR, and so on and so forth. Now, Karl Marx, as we all know, is one of the greatest thinkers of all times. Undoubtedly, he is one of the best thinkers, and undoubtedly, he has influenced the thought process of world nations a great deal. And I need not tell you separately, his two seminal works were Das Kapital and Communist Manifesto. Now, there is one concept which is associated with Karl Marx and all Marxists in general, that is the concept of surplus value. This you should always keep in mind, surplus value. Now, according to Marx and other Marxists, who creates value? Value is always created by the worker. The worker creates value, and that value is more than enough to deal with not only his requirements but also the requirements of the entire society. Plus, he also provides a profit to the capitalist. And who is the capitalist? Capitalist is the person who invests money in the market or in the machinery, tools, and so on and so forth. And he is the person whose capital is being invested. Now, Karl Marx states that surplus is created by the worker. The worker creates value. That is, a product is produced by the worker, and the worker actually creates value to that product. And value, once it is created, it is sufficient not only to give a subsistence way, but what does the capitalist actually do? He takes the entire value that the worker has given, has produced, and he gives only a subsistence wage to the worker. Then the rest of the money is more than enough to, in fact, meet his requirement. the requirement of other factors of production, and over and above all this, a surplus is created, and that surplus is taken in its entirety by the capitalists. So that is the basic concept that you should remember. Secondly, Marx states that there is the issue of class loyalties. Class loyalties actually cut across national boundaries. Class loyalties cut across national boundaries. What does that mean? This means that the interests of each class in each country is directly correlated to the interests of similar class and similar classes in other countries. So if you have a working class in one country, the interest of working class in country A will be similar to the interest of working class in country B, C, D, E, F, and so on and so forth. And therefore, all these working class will have a similar loyalty to a similar group. And this will cut across national boundaries. Now, Communist Manifesto, it is one of his seminal works. In that, he produces a statement, Karl Marx produces a statement to the effect that the workers of the world should unite. Let the workers of the world unite, that's what he states. And in this case, he produces two concepts. One is horizontal organization. Horizontal organization was what Reaist stated, that is, the world is, so power is the defining variable there. However, Karl Marx states that it is not horizontal organization which matters, it is vertical division which matters. And vertical division of the world is based on independent nations. Now, what are the essential elements of the Marxist approach? One, the essential element of the Marxist, the first essential element is that of the totality of the social world. What he means is that normally when we study the society, we study a society separately in terms of its economics, politics, history, sociology, so on and so forth. He says that studying the society separately in these terms will not work. The society has to be studied in its totality or in its entirety. So instead of dividing the society into the social aspect, economic aspect, political aspect, historical aspect, etc., it should be studied as a whole without this kind of differentiation. One aspect cannot be studied without understanding the other aspect. Therefore, he states that the study of the society is of an interdisciplinary character. This is very important. The study of the society is basically of an interdisciplinary character. That is what he states in the book Das Kapital 1. He always starts with, in his analysis, Karl Marx starts with simple social relations first, and then gradually moves on to progressively more complex social relations. Simple social relations involve husband and wife, one household to neighbors, so on and so forth. And when it graduates to higher and higher levels, it culminates with state relations in various relations which are taken in its entirety at the state level and even at the international level. So he always moves from a simple social relation setup to progressively complex ones. Now, this is very important. One of the cornerstones of the Marxian concept is the concept of materialistic interpretation of history. What does this mean? This means that economic development of the society determines the process of historical change. If there is a change in history, if there is change in historical relations, then you can rest assured that there is a change in the economic system which controls the society as well. Economic development is the engine of historical change. There is a tension between means of production and relations of production. These two concepts are very important for you. What is the difference between means of production and relations of production? Means of production basically means land, labor, capital, and organization. These are the 4 factors of production, and these are called the means of production. So remember, means of production essentially means land, labor, capital, and organization. And relations of production, what do they mean? Relations of production means the manner in which the arrangements are made of these means of production. That is, relations of production essentially deals with what is the production mix, how these means of production are utilized in the society. That is the content of relations of production. So Marx essentially states that the changes in economics of the society transforms the society as a whole, because mode of production conditions the social, economic, and political life. So if there is a change in the mode of production, that is, for example, if the production process changes from a communal system of production to a capitalist system of production, for example, then there will surely be a change in the social, economic, and political life of the people as such. The nature will definitely change, and that is a change which is inevitable in character. And this has been highlighted by Karl Marx very significantly in his work as well. So that is an important aspect. Then he goes on to state, this is also very important, legal, political, and cultural institutions reflect the nature of economic power and control in the society. What does it mean? Legal, political, and cultural institutions reflect the nature of economic power. That is, from the decisions given by the judges, for example, you can make out what is the nature of political power in that society. For example, if the judges constantly give their judgments in favor of the capitalist class, then it is clear that the power and influence in that society lies with the capitalist group. So, similarly, legal, political, and cultural institutions, the way they behave actually can tell you the nature of economic power in that society. That is, with whom the economic power lies in the society. That can be made out from these parameters. Now, economic change leads to change in legal and political superstructure. That is obvious. When you have a change in the economic system of the society, there will always be a change in the legal and political superstructure in the society as well. Now, what is the role of class in the Marxian approach? What does Marx say about the role of class in the Marxian approach? One, society is prone to class conflict. That is the statement that he makes. Society is always prone to class conflict. History of all hitherto existing societies is the history of class struggle. This is a statement he mentions in Communist Manifesto. Now, history of hitherto all societies is the history of class struggle. What does it mean? Right from the beginning of human civilization, if you look at any society, there always had been 2 contending groups. If you look at the ancient society, you had a group of serfs, and you had other people called the serf owners. The serfs were always controlled by the serf owners. And similarly, if you look at the capitalist society, there is a conflict between the capitalists and the workers. Why? Because the interest of the capitalists is different from the interest of the workers. The interest of the workers, what is it? The interest of the workers is to have a decent standard of living, to increase their wages, so on and so forth. What is the interest of the capitalists? The capitalist interest basically is to maximize their surplus value, maximize their profits. So these 2 interests are in conflict with each other. And as long as they remain in conflict with each other, there will be class struggle. Each phase in history has seen such conflicts. In a capitalist society, the conflict is between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, as I was just explaining. Now, an offshoot of this Marxian theory is the theory of imperialism. That is also very important. Now, this term imperialism was first used in the context of the expansionist policies of Napoleon I and British imperialism. So it is basically associated with those times when countries try to expand their territory into other areas and try to acquire more and more colonies for their own benefit. Now, it denotes a policy of expansion and acquisition of foreign territory. So there are two elements which are involved in the concept of imperialism. One is political domination, that is, you attack another country and politically dominate them. And second is economic exploitation, that is, you once your political domination is extended to a third country, you exploit that country economically, wean away their raw materials, and destroy their production structures, so that your country can transform that country which you have captured or you have colonized into your market. So that is the primary aim here. Now, oppression and exploitation of impoverished countries is an essential element in this. Now, if you read the work of people like Dadabhai Navroji, you will find that there is a systematic analysis of how the wealth and resources of a country have been exploited and taken away by the imperialist countries. And I think you should read that. It is available. Now it is, in fact, in public domain, so you can read it without any hassle as such. Now, what does this imperialism actually constitute? It constitutes an export of capitalism, export of capital, and import of raw materials and monopoly profit. Now, if you look at the history of colonial India, you will find this to be very true. The British came into India, they colonized India, and they found that India has a very strong rural economy. Now, how did they want to subjugate this? What they did was that they found that India had a very good export in textiles. Therefore, they took it as their policy to destroy the export infrastructure of clothes that they had in India. So, in Bengal, they even went to the extent, experts say, of destroying the looms of all people who were involved in production of textiles. In Dhaka, the Dhaka muslin used to be very popular. It was so soft that in European countries, the nobility used to spend a lot of money to import all these things. And in fact, this is what the British imperialists wanted to destroy. So once they destroyed the production structure in Bengal, the farmers who are actually cultivating these raw materials, they did not have anywhere to sell these raw materials such as cotton and such other things. So the British could easily buy these cotton and other things, the raw materials, at very cheap prices, and they exported these to the factories in Manchester and produced new clothes and imported these clothes into India to sell it to Indian people once again and thereby get further profit. So you see the vicious circle that is operating here. The vicious circle operates in such a way that in the first phase you get all the raw materials at throwaway prices, and in the second phase you also sell your finished products in the markets of these countries, and these countries are further exploited by taking away further profits from here. So this is a kind of vicious circle which operates. Lenin therefore stated that imperialism is the highest state of capitalism. For maintaining profits, capitalists look for places to export their surplus capital, which led to competition for colonies. That is, when all countries, all European countries found that there was no domestic market where they could sell all these products which they were producing, they tried to look for more and more colonies to acquire where they could sell these products in to a captive market. And as such, what happened was that over a period of time, these countries acquired more and more markets, and these markets were in fact saturated, and therefore these capitalist countries fought among each other to acquire each other's markets or each other's colonies also. Therefore, you had a large number of imperialist wars in that period. And if you look at it, the First World War was basically an imperialist war of this kind. Now, there is a difference in the concepts of imperialism and colonialism. Imperialism basically looks at the aspect of command or domination over a colony. Colonialism, as such, is the process of settlement of a detached people in distant places, that is, the process of immigration. Now, there is another author, Hobson. He states that imperialism is characterized by the existence of several empires in competition and predominance of finance capital over mercantile capital. This is a very critical statement. Hobson states that there is this concept of economic taproot of imperialism, which is the excessive accumulation of capital searching for investment avenues. Once there is an excessive supply or accumulation of capital, then there is no other way but to look for investment avenues for this capital as such. Excessive accumulation is due to excessive savings as a result of unequal distribution of power, of wealth. What he says is that in capitalist countries, there is a great deal of unequal distribution of wealth. And when you have unequal distribution of wealth, what happens is that some people, the capitalist group, will have huge quantities of money with them. They will be very rich. And human wants, however more you spend, are limited. So they will have huge surplus. They will have this, they will accumulate this huge surplus and it will be a saving with them. And once the savings exceed a certain limit, they will look for investment avenues. And these investment avenues, when they find that there is not adequate investment avenues within their country, they will look for other countries to invest this. This is basically the economic taproot of imperialism. Now, equal distribution of wealth will increase the purchasing power and market expansion. So there is a need for social reforms according to him. He states that if you distribute wealth equally in the society, then that can be a solution for this problem of imperialism. Now, imperialism had other critics as well. One of the most prominent critic is Rosa Luxemburg. She states that she's a very prominent theorist for that matter. She states that imperialism is the last stage of the historical race of capitalism. That is, imperialism, in the case of imperialism, in fact, capitalism has reached its final extent. There is no further going ahead for capitalism. After this, capitalism has to collapse. Unequal exchange between imperialists and host nation exists. That is, as I told you, this is what I explained to you at the beginning. Imperialists take away all the exploit rather all the raw materials and surplus from the host country, and the host country is exploited to the fullest extent possible. And what the host country gets in return is a pittance, a small amount in return to what they are giving to the imperialist country. There's a close link between military domination, political control, and external debt. This is very clear. Why is there this problem of military domination? Because capitals are looking for more and more investment avenue. And once military domination happens, then there is political control over that state. And once political control is established, then the host country is forced into a debt trap because all finances lie with the imperialist country. And there's a very critical example for this. For example, the establishment of railways in India. Now, if you look at it, British did establish railways, but what was it for? It was basically to ensure that their raw materials, which they were usurping from the poor Indian farmers, reached the ports and from there to Manchester and other places in England. So, for that, what they did, they wanted to establish railways. They did establish railways, but for that, what they did, they invited European capitalists to invest in that, basically British capitalists. And to add to all this, they gave sovereign debt guarantees, which means that if you invest 1 rupee here, you will get certain percentage of that as return, whatever be. Whether the railways is in profit or loss or whatever it is, you will get an assured return. So the investor did not have any risk at all, and the Indian public had to pay through taxes, ticket charges, so on and so forth to repay this. gradually the country had to fall into a debt trap. This is just one of those examples. Militarism is the preeminent means for realization of surplus value. That is clear. There is no further explanation needed for that. Now, Lenin, you have to remember that Lenin is another theorist who has propounded this concept very well. Lenin states that imperialism is the highest stage of capitalism. Why? He says that there is no possibility for reforming capitalism as such. There is absolutely no possibility of reforming capitalism. And if you want to end capitalism, it has to be ended through a revolution and nothing else. There has to be a revolution to end capitalism. Why? Because if you don't have a revolution, capitalists are not going to abdicate their power just by themselves. They have to be removed through a capitalist revolution. That's what Lenin states. It is the highest stage of capitalism because there's a dominance of monopolies and finance capital leading to export of capital, which is the hallmark of modern imperialism. There's the export of capital. There is an export of capital, as I told just before. For example, for investment in railways and other things, capital is exported from the developed countries to developing countries and non-developing countries. At that time, it was basically colonies, and there is the resultant exploitation of the host country. There was another theorist by the name called Kautsky, and Lenin criticizes Kautsky for his concept of ultra-imperialism, where he stated that a union of world imperialism will come and there will be no conflict between imperialists as such. What Kautsky stated was that imperial powers will over a period of time understand that their interests are aligned to each other and they will form a kind of union of world imperialists. And therefore, in future, wars between imperialists would not happen. But Lenin stated that it is far from true. Lenin stated that it is away from this, can be the most erroneous kind of conception. And Lenin was true up to a certain extent. Lenin states that finance capitalism increases unevenness and contradictions in the world economy, leading to conflict. Now, Lenin stated very clearly that when you people, your capitalists do not have avenues for proper investment in their own countries, and even the investments possibilities in the colonies has exhausted, then what will they do? They have no other option but to fight with other capitalist countries to gain more colonies, and this will definitely lead to more and more unevenness in the world economy, leading to more and more conflicts. And if you see, Lenin was more or less right in this kind of postulate. There were imperialist conflicts. There were, in fact, if you look at the First World War itself, as I said earlier, it was an imperialist conflict. And therefore, the contradictions within capitalism would definitely be reflected over time. It is definitely another matter that all this did not hold true for a longer period of time, because capitalism in some way or the other adjusted itself. So over a period of time, you had a system like social democracy, which included aspects of communist thought, socialist thought, and reformed capitalism. And therefore, what happened was that capitalism became much more bearable and much more easier to accept for the people. And that was one of the significant aspects which came into play in later years. And therefore, in social democracies, you have universal healthcare, you have universal education, that is free education for all the people, and you have various social security schemes, so on and so forth. All that were things which were not postulated or even imagined by many of the communists and the imperialist thinkers, anti-imperialist thinkers for that matter. So that actually changed the nature of capitalism in future and actually created a kind of more bearable kind of capitalism which came in future years. Now, this is a kind of reading that you can have. This is from MIT OpenCourseware. Anyone interested in reading through all these aspects and understanding more about this can note this link. This is very useful. This is a link which can be used by you for various purposes, for your study processes. These are all links which can be used only for your study processes. These are not commercial links. They have to be used only for your understanding and only for your study processes. This is the open courseware of MIT, and you can access this. And these are actually the lecture notes of various MIT professors and so on, and use it only for your educational purposes. That is your study purpose alone and nothing else, and it will be very useful for you to understand this. So I think we have come to the end of what I had to say today. Now, what I request you to do now is to actually go through all this, understand it in great detail, and definitely think about how you can improve upon your understanding as such. Today the strength of students is very less. Only 5 students are attending, but even then I feel it is worth even if all the 5 students understand what I am saying and are able to contribute better. So I see that Mr. Jitin Joseph is preparing for UGC NET. Good, you should prepare, and understanding theories well is the primary and first phase of doing well in UGC NET. So I wish you all the best. So any clarification that is required on all these aspects? Marxism especially. Marxism, realism, and so on.
Sir, can you suggest any book where we have more information about functionalism and neo-functionalism?
I think Palmer and Perkins is good. You can look at it. There will be a great deal of analysis of that. And basically, if you go through the net, there will be a lot of articles on this, research articles. You can read through that also. I had given the citation of one book, now Palmer and Perkins.
Yes.
There it is given very clearly, and it is open courseware also. There also Palmer and this area is explained very well. You can go through it. The open courseware, the link for which I had given a few minutes back. I hope you have noted that link. Are you able to note that link?
Sir, can you? I cannot copy it because you are sharing the link. Can you share
okay,
that?
I can show it once again. Sorry for being very fast on that.
No, sir. Can you share the PDF file?
Yeah.
Can you give us the PDF file?
I will do one thing. I will put this presentation on this thing, our Facebook page, so that you can view it anytime.
Okay.
That will be of general benefit also.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
I will give you the link for. Do you know RC Vadagara's this thing Facebook page address?
Yes, sir. I'm following it.
You are following it, no?
Yes.
So no problem. Otherwise, I could have given it. Anyway, I will try to paste it here. Just a second. This OCW is very good. In fact, it's a wonderful series of articles and lectures given there. It will be of great help to all of you who are following this. Any other aspect which needs to be discussed, or we can call it a day today?
Yeah, sure, sir. We are not. I have more questions as well, but it's been almost 2 hours now, so I don't want to do that. Sir, please conduct more classes so that it will.
And by next month middle or something, I will. Anyway, I assure you, you'll be having more and more sessions. But I hope it is useful for you.
Yes, it is very useful because we are barely getting any classes from our center. Actually, I had completed, honestly, I had completed the course and I scored good in international politics. Now I'm preparing for UGC NET. And your classes are wonderful comparing to the other classes that are available in this platform. Like now there is a ongoing from IGNOU. I mean, there are more classes, but you are sharing these slides and all, and others are not sharing the slides. It's very helpful. I think it is the best thing I have attended.
I will definitely conduct more sessions, and whenever I get time, I will do that. And in the meantime, kindly read through these readings which I have given you. That will be very helpful for you, especially if you are preparing for NET and things like that. It will be of great help to you.
Sir, I have 2 books on international politics. That is one by Andrew Haywood, and the other one is that V.N. Khanna.
Yeah, both of those are good, but please go through Palmer and Perkins. I strongly suggest that, because that will give a good foundation on IR as such.
Okay.
If it is not a problem for you, just buy that book. And also this OCW is also very helpful for you, because many latest aspects have been mentioned there.
Okay, sir. Okay, fine. Thank you.
So thank you for please.
Yeah, sure, sir. Thank you.
Please.
Thank you very much. It's been almost 2 hours. I know that. It's yeah.
No problem. And it has been an absolute pleasure interacting with all of you. Please do join me next time also, and please do tell your friends also.
Sir, one request. Can you share your number, phone number?
Phone number, I am okay.
No,
I
promise, sir. We are not going to disturb you for anything. But if in case,
yeah, sure. It is because this will come in the chat also, and when I put it on the website, it will be a great problem for me. So that it's not problem as such, but people from all over the country calling me will be very difficult. So what you can do is that if you can just email me on my email address mrajesh@ignore.ac.in. That will be great.
Okay, fine. M Rajesh.
I will just type it there. You will understand very easily. I hope you are able to see it.
Yes, I got it, sir.
Yeah, and there I can share you all the details and help you in whatever way I can. So thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. I hope the other participants do not have any further query. There's other than Mr. Jitin, if anyone has a query, can you just type it? Okay, next time when we announce these sessions, I have a request, kindly tell your friends also, so that more people come to the session. Thank you, Vandana. It has been a pleasure interacting with all of you.